Welcome to the Industry 4.0 Club's Fireside Chat. The club's purpose is to engage the power of diverse worldwide talent to accelerate the global evolution to Industry 4.0. We accomplish this by hosting and supporting respectful, thoughtful, and interdisciplinary open conversations and creating quality content on wide-ranging Industry 4.0 topics to expand the reach of our community. My name is Mike Ungar, and I am the CEO of the Industry 4.0 Club. I have over 40 years of leadership and management experience, with most of that in manufacturing at Michelin. I'm joined today by one of the club's co-founders, Mike Yost. Mike, would you mind introducing yourself further, please?
Not at all. Thank you, Mike. As Mike said, my name is Mike Yost. I'm one of the co-founders of the club and the volunteer chairman of the organization. I've been in industry almost 40 years myself, with the past 16 years on the industrial nonprofit side. So really excited that today we get to speak with Seth McDonald, who's the Executive Vice President of Business Separation Management at GE Aerospace. We're talking to Seth ahead of his MX.0 Southeast presentation in Greenville, South Carolina on April 7th, 2026. And the topic will be modernizing a 100-year enterprise, utilizing digital ecosystem and traditional IT for the next 20 years. So Seth, we're happy to have you here. I'll give a little bit more background on Seth and his role at GE. He spearheads enterprise-wide digital transformation as the company advances to be a standalone pure-play aerospace and defense leader. So Seth gets to oversee complex, high-impact programs that modernize digital ecosystem while elevating compliance, reliability, and user experience. Drawing on his deep experience in engineering and supply chain, Seth brings a cohesive, cross-functional perspective to information technology. Seth is widely recognized as a thought leader and innovator, which will make him perfect for the event. So come and hear him. He gets to champion pragmatic digital solutions that accelerate time to value, lower total cost of ownership, and deliver the flexibility required to meet an ever-evolving business landscape and drive transformational outcomes at scale. So thanks, Seth. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, before we talk with Seth, just wanted to highlight a bit about the MX.0 Southeast event. We consider that to be the go-to gathering for manufacturers in our region to connect, collaborate, and learn from real-world examples of successful digital transformation, talent management, and sustainability shared by those who are making it already happen today. Beginning in 2021, the event has empowered local manufacturers to advance their careers and businesses through valuable knowledge exchange and impactful networking opportunities. So just a quick comment before we get into the questions as well. For those listening to us live on LinkedIn, if you have a question or a comment you'd like to share with Seth, please put it in the comment box and we'll make sure we share it with Seth during our broadcast today. So welcome, Seth. We're glad to take time out of your schedule to join us.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me just jump in and ask you to kind of get us started. When you're modernizing a legacy digital backbone like your topic's about inside a century-old manufacturer, what are some of the first decisions that determine whether the effort accelerates operations or actually creates too much disruption?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I do want to take a minute to maybe take a step back and talk a little bit about what GE looks like these days. So, GE is an extremely old company. It dates back to Edison and some of the first inventions there. But in November of 2021, there was an announcement made that GE was going to split into 3 different public companies. So it was going to split into an energy company, a healthcare company, and then an aerospace company. And so the remain co is GE Aerospace. So GE moved from being GE just singularly to GE Aerospace. And it is now really that pure play aerospace and defense company. And we're really working our way through the maturity there of that company and going through the separation activity when it comes to how we support from a digital technology or an IT side. And that's where I sit within the organization, is within that digital technology organization. And when I first joined GE, it's been about 20 years now, GE was a massive conglomerate. You had things like NBC Universal, you had oil and gas, transportation, healthcare, power generation, light bulbs. You had home appliances as well. When you look at how that was supported from an IT standpoint, it had a corporate function that did probably about 70 to 80% of the core service delivery of IT. So things from the network, things from your storage, your hosting, digital workplace, cybersecurity, information security, and that had to be a one size fits all. So if you can imagine highly regulated with less regulated businesses being all under the same umbrella, it really was something that was, I'll say, working with my corporate brothers and sisters, amazing to be able to have an ecosystem that supports from a digital side, but it also had some drawbacks as well. And so as we look at becoming a standalone business, we had to take a step back and say, what do we want to be when we grow up? How do we think about ourselves as truly that pure play aerospace and defense? Different regulatory requirements. How do we strip out some of the bolt-on security that we had to put in place in order to meet the requirements there, and say, how do we streamline? So really sort of once in a generation, once in a lifetime opportunity, because you don't often split companies apart like this, to really define who we're going to be as we go forward. And so, when you ask the question about, the decisions that need to be made, really the first one was, the identity and who do you want to be? We did take a step back. A team worked to define what that new landscape looks like. And instead of conveying all the existing services over, we've stood up many new. That includes new network, new cyber tooling, which I'll get to here in a minute. Really trying to embrace things like GCC high environments for things like Teams and the digital workplace. Things that maybe we did not have as full access to from a user standpoint because they didn't meet the needs, the cybersecurity controls that we had before, meaning that you had to have bolt-on tools and one-purpose tools in order to fill the gaps in some of the platforms and sharing of the information. For us, one of the major things we had to focus on is cybersecurity, and we're under strict obligations to protect some of our data that's tied to Department of War or other types of highly regulated information. People were not able to seamlessly work within collaboration tools before because that involved sharing of data, and that data need to be protected. So as we've stood up the new environment, that has really opened up new opportunities for us, and I'll get into a little bit of how that works into the shop floor here in just a minute. Mm-hmm. But a massive amount of migration activity that's needed as you go from one environment to another, because literally we have two different environments, and moving from one house to another. If you've done that personally, you know how much that takes of sorting through all your old things and saying, what do I want to bring with me? And then how do I move in comfortably? So to say there's no disruption, there is disruption. Absolutely, there is disruption. But it's how do you do that in an organized fashion? How do you do that in a way that is recognized as being value? I think is really some of the key aspects of what we've been focusing on as we've been making this move.
So Seth, as we talk about the speed of technology and Industry 4.0 and IT and those worlds coming together, and an organization like GE growing and growing and growing, and now you're on the side of separating it. I'm just wondering what practical governance or organizational changes made a difference when you're aligning IT, aligning because even though you're a subset of the former
Sure.
large organization, you still have to align IT, engineering, plant ops, plant operations, et cetera, et cetera. So any advice or best practices of how you guys led that?
Yeah, no, I think, I'll jump into maybe a key tenet of the new design, which is zero trust, which is, from a cybersecurity standpoint, I think really the direction that a lot of the industry is going. And quite frankly, one of the few ways to probably meet all the regulatory requirements and the protections that we need. Now, zero trust, moving from sort of your traditional network designs and cyber designs of like your castle moat models, where if you're inside, you can access a lot, versus that zero trust, which is saying that I need to have very, 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 very named access for an individual, and almost going down to the data level in a lot of cases to be able to access things. That is something that obviously comes with its own level of complexity, but it also opens up some opportunities, which maybe we'll talk about here in a minute. But when you think about that and you say, all right, I'm moving from a traditional model where IT has a lot of the keys of the kingdom there, to one where zero trust affects everybody, and encryption from point to point is very, very important as part of that too. Really, two different things: technology and then the people side, right? So you talk about the governance side of this. In order for us to really move forward, I think with our IT/OT convergence, making sure that we have the right technologies in place and access to those technologies. Great example of this not everything you do is in house. Especially with the move to SaaS and external vendors out there. How do they get access to your data, or how do you point them in point AI in the direction of some of your machine data? Zero trust is one of those things that enables that to take place like it never could before, right? So if you think about that, once you're inside, you have access to everything. You don't want to give a vendor access to everything. You want to give them access to just the information that they need in order to go do that specific thing. I think that's a real accelerator for us as we go forward here. Maybe a little bit of a short-term, burden, if you will, or barrier as we make some of those adjustments. But then, how do you go do that long-term? If you think about like from a people side and really the governance of this, one of the major drivers that we've had internally, which I think has set us up well for success, is we are under the obligations of things like this CMMC, or the cybersecurity maturity model certification as an aerospace and largely as a defense contractor. Now we're making moves in that area, regardless of if it's military or commercial, because at the end of the day, protecting our data is extraordinarily important to us. I mean, it's our differentiator, right, jewels. But if we think about that from a military side, we need to make sure that we have that protection of that classified or controlled and classified information.
Seth, when you went to implement that zero trust, can you talk for a minute about some of the change management challenges you had? I can just imagine the conversation. I've been working fine all these years, and all of a sudden now, tell me more about what that was like. Yeah.
Well, I'll maybe give a couple examples of that. Just looking at our applications and how those applications are deployed, having to go into to new access management or identity manage of that. Working with our supplier teams and working with our internal DT teams, they manage the access for thousands of different suppliers, and so the different level of access management that's required is 2 to 3 times what it used to be, but it helps with here again, once you get inside, to being able to access what you need to and do your job. I think the other piece as well is, we look at the plant-to-plant communications. Some of that stuff is actually transparent to the end users because of the way that it's built into the technology layers. But in other cases, you actually have to introduce new types of technology in order to manage that within our facilities. But the connectivity definitely does open up an opportunity there, but it does also create some additional barriers or change management as you tell people that look, you have to go through these specific steps now versus what you had to do in the past. And that is, that's part of, human nature of moving somebody's cheese from A to B, giving them the new instructions of how they have to operate. And when they hit a brick wall and don't have access to something, making sure that they know the way to request that and to break down that barrier.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's wonderful.
I just want to remind everybody that if you're with us live on LinkedIn, we're talking with Seth McDonald, who's the Executive Vice President of Business Separation Management at GE Aerospace. So if you have questions for Seth or you want to contribute some thoughts, please go ahead and put them in the comments field. We're happy to interact that way. And Seth is going to be speaking at the MX.0 event in Greenville, South Carolina in April. And so we certainly want to encourage everybody to go there. And I'm just wondering, Seth, from your perspective, you talk about zero trust, talk about CMMC. I know a lot of smaller companies. So I live in Ohio, we're a defense industrial base. The CMMC compliance requirements are all over the place. And actually, a lot of people are walking away from that kind of business because it's such a daunting task. I'm wondering, are there any advantages that you see that like you've adopted things maybe even more broadly than you are required by the actual code? It just sort of makes things easier for you to sort of adopt a practice there, or any guidance you can give there, on those types of compliance.
Yeah. Boy, that's a great question. And yes, to say that CMMC can become an interesting puzzle to go solve would be probably an understatement. And I think the barrier to entry in some cases can be pretty high. Obviously we took that opportunity to say, well, if we have to do this differently, how do we go approach it? And that does require, and I mentioned like going to, special versions of Teams, going to the GovCloud, FedRAMP moderate environments, or even high in some cases within AWS. Looking at those technologies where there's maybe not as much parity in some of the product offerings there, that also becomes a little bit of a barrier for us. I think as we've looked back and said, what do we do from a cybersecurity standpoint? A lot of it comes down to, where's the data stored, and then how do you access it? Which making sure that you have the right identity solutions in place, and the requirements there are something that it does sometimes require outside solutions to go do it, and in some cases you can architect things internally as long as they meet the intent, and you show that you have the right records and whatnot. But I think putting in place some of these new solutions, and maybe talk about them a little bit more at the conference,
Sure.
give sort of tip to tail ability for more of your threat monitoring, your access management, your logging, all of those things that maybe were bolt-on activities before become as part of a part and parcel of some of these new solutions. It becomes a lot easier to maintain. Now, here again, you have to take a leap. Which is, I think, one of the things that I'm proud that we did that, and it becomes an accelerator at a later point in time. But the buying into some of the platforms and stitching that together in a way that, as I mentioned, even with like some of the zero trust, it becomes almost transparent to people, and they don't realize that their data is protected in a different way than what it was before. Becomes key.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate you're dealing with a very large organization and making a big change. What part of those principles will apply to someone who's, let's say, small or mid-size?
Yeah.
What you've learned?
Well, I think if you go back to the more to the problem statement, or the opportunity, depending on how you want to phrase that. If you're a smaller business out there, you probably don't have as much to invest in some of your digital technologies in the same way that maybe we have. And here again, we're trying to support multiple thousands of individuals across global operations. But I think it really comes down to trying to define what problem are you trying to solve. I mean, if the problem is CMMC, then that probably is one solution. But if you're really trying to solve how do you move faster in a digital age with cybersecurity, that's maybe a slightly different solution to go after. And I think you have to make some bets. You have to make some bets, and you have to really understand your business to begin with. Because I think one of the things that we have an operating system out there, and I don't mean like Windows or Linux, but I'm talking about like operating system.
Right.
That helps us to understand and more refine and challenge and question what the problems are that we're going after. Of taking that step back and saying, I'm trying to achieve this thing, and I need to be able to put in place a specific solution for this, and really get the root cause of the problem, and how do I go solve that? Because I think if you don't take some of those bigger bets, you're going to be just band-aiding along the way. And so buying into some of the platforms or some of the solutions that are out there that say, yes, maybe they don't give me as much benefit today, day one, but they allow me to accelerate. And I think cybersecurity is a really important part of this as we go into our digital age of just, the amount of information that's out there for everybody, even if it is a small manufacturer, protection of that information, as part of why they're in business. Not focusing on that is probably going to become a decelerator and potentially, a threat to existence in the future. And so I think that's part of the way that we focused on it. Now, the scale and the magnitude and the levels, I think it's very different as you go down to some of the smaller manufacturers. But I think really defining that problem statement and really going back and understanding your business and what you're trying to achieve, I think is extraordinarily important.
Yeah, I think
I'm curious.
Just to confirm what you're saying, I think what you're describing makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like the basic blocking and tackling. You have to, before you can really leverage what you've got to make sure it's protected. It's what keeps you in business in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you look at that from, take, IoT, take, Industry 4.0 and some of the activities there, it's very easy to, plug a system on top of your other systems, right? And give you maybe some short-term gains. But how far does that take you? And so here again, I think that's, it's a critical thing to understand that problem.
Yeah.
To maybe take a step back, put those building blocks and, for lack of a better way to phrase it, do the hard work in order to accelerate forward. Sometimes you do have to take that step back to move forward.
I was just curious, Seth, in my role in Northeast Ohio, I work almost exclusively with small manufacturers and we mentioned CMMC and some of those issues. And there's conversations right now about collaboration between the large defense contractors and the smaller suppliers. Is there anything that you see either specifically within your business or more broadly across the industry where smaller companies that either are suppliers or want to be suppliers to an organization like yours could get some guidance or some benchmarking or some assistance?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't play as much in that space, at least in the current role. But I know we do have some open platforms that we collaborate with our suppliers, and ultimately they gain some of the benefits of that. Inherit some of the controls that we're talking about as that data is transferred. I'm trying to think of a few of the other sort of consortiums that are out there. I know there are a few that help with navigating this now complex world of cybersecurity, and I'm blanking on a few of the names, but to really help the smaller companies as they go through this path, because here again, it's maybe easier. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's easier for some of the larger companies to go do that. When you start to get down to the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, it makes it very, very difficult and recognize the limitations there.
Right, appreciate that.
Yeah, you've got your point about tier 2, tier 3 is in order for you guys to be in the game with the government, they've got to be in the game as well with just as much rigor, don't they?
They do, and I think that's one of the areas where we do focus is, how do we assess and how do we? There is help that we're providing, the guidance, the maybe making sure that we understand the requirements together and the flow down of that, so that information is protected. There have been some conversations about, how do we make those investments on their behalf and partner, because ultimately we strive or thrive or fail together in a lot of those respects, where we do not have full vertical supply chains, right?
Yeah. Well, so you're going to be, as we've mentioned, you're going to be presenting at MX.0 Southeast in Greenville, South Carolina, on April 7th. For those that come to your presentation, what do you hope they walk away with in terms of call to action or not?
Yeah. No, I do look forward to the conference, and I've got a lot of I'd say probably lessons learned that I'd love to share. It's been a tremendous journey over the last 2 years for this specific transformation. And so I do want to make sure that maybe I impart some knowledge, both the good, the bad, the ugly, as we go through as an industry transformations like this. I think just maybe a couple teasers here. I mentioned it, facing into the hard things, right? So it's very easy to use digital technologies to solve problems. It's harder to change, and we talked about it, the cultural elements, the human elements of it, as well as truly understanding your business and how your business works today, and the capacity of your organization to go make change.
Mhm.
It's a critical element that I'll go into a little bit deeper as we go forward. And I'm sure both of you have experienced that through your careers, and I've seen that as part of the challenge with any change, be it a digital transformation or a cultural transformation, or companies merging or divesting. The cultural element is one that just continues to perpetuate. And then I think the second one too is how do you build the burning platform, and how do you burn the boats? A lot of burning metaphors there. I apologize for that, but how do you make sure that everybody is engaged around what needs to take place? And then how do you make sure that you keep that fire burning to move forward? And there is a point of no return, and you lean forward on it, or you fail forward, is a terminology we use a lot. Fail forward into the change, and figure it out. We have a great problem-solving culture at GE Aerospace. That's sort of been the culture for a very long time. And so sometimes you don't have all the answers, but you've got some really smart people in the room and across the globe to change those things. And so, I think that's an important part, as well as that goes back into what I was talking about with the operating system, of how an operating system is a critical thing to either hamper your momentum, or accelerate it, which was definitely our case.
Super. So we've been talking with Seth McDonald from GE Aerospace for the almost last 30 minutes now. As we wrap up, Mike, I'll ask you for a final thought, and then Seth will give you the last word before we close out. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, very excited. Appreciate the time here today, Seth, and your willingness to share at the event. Would encourage everybody to attend and learn. As I mentioned through the course of our conversation, I tend to work with smaller companies nowadays, and oftentimes I get the question of, well, how relatable is a GE Aerospace to me? And I think one of your points there, Seth, as far as the culture, right, the change management, the people side of things, is an area where I always encourage people to learn from. The larger organizations, people that have tended to get after those sorts of problems, and have real world experience for many years in dealing with the people side of things, and that's less of a money thing, and it's less of a technical architecture kind of discussion. So I would say lean into the idea around understanding the implications from a people and a cultural perspective, and meet Seth and ask him all the hard questions that you can.
Thanks,
Great.
Mike. Seth, how about you? How about a final thought before we
Yeah. Well, I talked about it here just briefly, but it sounds super simple, but I think it's the focus on what you're trying to solve. What benefit are you trying to gain, and is it big enough to matter? I think oftentimes we talk about change, and we sort of nibble around the edges, and we never really get to the hard conversation, which I think is to your point, Mike, something that regardless if you're a large company or a small company, you still have those challenges or opportunities. So look, I'm looking forward to the conference. I welcome anybody to join, and look forward to both sharing some more things, as well as the exchange of ideas with others.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you very much. So Seth, again, thanks for joining us to give us a bit of a preview of your presentation at MX.0 Southeast, happening on April 7th at the Hyatt Hotel in Greenville, South Carolina. If you haven't registered and would like to attend the event, if you're a manufacturer, please go to this website or this web address, and it's still not too late to register and be there and hear from Seth. Join the Industry 4.0 Club while we hear from Seth and other wonderful speakers at the event. The Industry 4.0 Club would certainly like to encourage you to take action. You've heard some of the things that they've done at GE Aerospace today, but that might be attending a workshop, reading an article, attending the MX.0 Southeast event, or even starting a smart manufacturing roadmap for your facility. We'd love to hear from you, hear what you're doing. please drop us a note on our website at www.industry4lclub.com or on our LinkedIn page and let us know what you're doing to advance the deployment of Industry 4.0. We also host these conversations weekly. So if you'd like to be a guest and have something to share with our audience, again, we'd love to have you on our fireside chat. Again, drop us a note at our website or our LinkedIn page. And with that, thanks again, Mike. Thanks, Seth, for your time, and look forward to seeing you in early April.
Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.